All right, today I'm working on a 70 horsepower carburetor off of a 2-stroke force. So far I've gotten the bowl pulled off and going to proceed to work on getting the rest of the carburetor stripped down. This is where we're at right now. To get to this point, there's literally one screw that has a small washer on the back side of it and a cork gasket, and then your carburetor bowl, float rod, and then needle. So now I'm going to set y'all up and proceed to do the rest of the teardown. Now the next thing I want to take out would be the idle jet screw, which you want to screw in all the way until it's lightly seated and then count how many turns that it's turned out. And this should get you your preliminary idle circuit when you put this thing back together. So there's half, 1, 1.5, I would say like 1 3/4. And then we'll take that out. And we're gonna run this carburetor through our ultrasonic cleaner with our aircraft grade cleaning solution that is non-harmful to aluminum. And that's our idle plug circuit for vent. And then this would be one of our bowl jets, which appears to be fine. And then from there, we will dunk her in the ultrasonic cleaner and then proceed to reassemble. Now this is the ultrasonic cleaner that I have. I'm not going to turn it on and start the cycle because it makes a lot of noise on the GoPro. If I can remember how to turn this thing on. There it is. So basically you set your desired temperature, and it does Celsius, and then you run it for, however long you feel like you should run it. I'm probably going to run this one for 15 minutes. And as you can see, my solution is pretty well used. And then I got my extra bowl in there for small parts. That way they don't fall out. So I'm gonna put everything in here that I want cleaned. Small parts go in the little bucket. We'll put this idle jet in there. Go as long as this bowl jet is in there. And then the rest of it, we're pretty well good to go. Okay. I do like to make sure that it's completely submerged. And I may rotate this around a couple of times, so I may run it longer than 15 minutes. Alright, I'll get back to y'all when the carburetor's cleaned. Alright there, we are back from our carb cleaning. I soaked it for a little bit longer than 15 minutes. As you can tell, everything is pretty spick and span. I've already put the bowl gasket back in here. We're gonna try to reuse the bowl gasket. Down inside of there is the high-speed jet, and I think it's the emulsifier tube. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. And then over here we got our idle speed jet, and then our vent, which I've already put back in. And because I cleaned all this with just regular water, and then sprayed it all off with compressed air, and then cleaned it with a little dab of carb cleaner, and made sure we had good flow through our fuel inlet here, both directions. And then you want to make sure that your idle needle is not bent or have any ridges around the end of it where it seats. And then you want to clean up your needle seat for your bowl. And then this here is your overflow tube, and this is all clean and pretty well ready to go. You can see a little bit of daylight down through there. And the bowl was already taken off previously and cleaned by the owner. So now I'm going to set you up. We're going to put this thing back together. I'm going to start off by putting the idle screw back in it, which goes into this port here. And remember, this was out about 1 3/4 turns from seated. So you have to screw this all the way in until it's seated. And it's seated. So now we go half, 1, 1 1/2, and then 3/4, which I'm gonna eyeball it there and say that's probably good enough. So that's completed. And now we can move on to our float assembly. So we're gonna put our needle valve in. I've already cleaned up our float here. So you just clean that up with some paper towels and a little bit of carb cleaner, and then put it in place. And these pins can be a little contrary on the forces, because there's a little splines on one end of it. So I'm gonna remember which way those splines went, and then it goes in. To get this out, you have to use a pair of needle nose pliers and just be careful with it. And then place it back in. Again, needle nose pliers, and just be careful. You do not want to break these ears off, because at that point you'll pretty much be getting a new carburetor. This one's giving me a little bit of fit here. I may have to wiggle her back out. Move y'all to this side. And we'll clean her up a little bit here, and then try to go back in. And hopefully it'll go in this time. There we go. And then you want to look for free float movement, and make sure that it has a good amount of drop. And then when it's seated, you want it to be level, pretty much. The top of the float to be level with the bottom of the carb body. And now we're going to put the bowl back on. And since we're reusing the gasket, we have to be particularly careful on where this bowl seats back into place. Otherwise, this thing's gonna leak. And we're also reusing the gasket on the end of our bleed valve. Put this in place. And none of this stuff has to be very tight, so we're just going to snug this up. That should be good right there. And then you can hear the float actuation. And what I'll do is I'll use a little bit of compressed air and make sure that the float isn't stuck. And it is not. And then we'll flip it upside down. I heard the float close. And it's closed. So that concludes our carb rebuild on a 70 horsepower force. I hope some of you found this video helpful. We have free butterfly actuation. Everything's clean on our carb body. Our plate's nice and clean. It should be good to go. Alright, sorry if it's a bit windy, but this is the 70 horsepower carburetor rebuild that I've been putting together for the channel. It goes to a Bayliner Capri 1600. I'm unsure on the year of the boat, but we got it put back together. It also had some crankcase access holes that were leaking on the side of the block here, and those are all sealed back up. And it's pretty well ready to go. I was just running it. It starts up real nice and revs out good. Not a bad little boat. They say it needs some interior work, but you know, if you're just looking for a river boat, it would be a good candidate for that. You know, weekends on the river, enjoying friends on the sandbar. It has a large battery in it. It is, I do believe it's 1200 cranking amps, which is way too much for this engine, but it gets the job done. Over the years, folks have put aftermarket stereo in it and that kind of stuff, and I left that unhooked because I was unsure of the wiring on it. But we'll turn the water on and here in a minute, and I'll show you how it fires up and revs out and everything. Here's the front. Like I said, the seats are not great, and the hole is, you know, it doesn't have any big holes in it, but it's got some sandbar marks in it. I'll set y'all up and we'll get this thing fired up. pretty good in my opinion, considering the thing wouldn't even idle correctly, you know, or even run out all the way when I first started working on it. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this one. Hopefully this is another project in the books.